Welcome to our first workshop of 2021. We've been running some short half-hour webinars, but this is the first kind of more in-depth look at Microsoft 365, which we do in collaboration with the IT trainer. So for those that don't know me, my name is Rich Davies. I'm account manager at Affinity. So I basically look after, probably the majority of my job is looking after the marketing for Affinity, but I'm also sales focused as well. So I cover both angles there. I tell just to those people that don't know Affinity. So we're based in Sheffield. We're an IT, telecoms, and electrical are our kind of our fields of expertise. Mainly IT support. So anybody that needs help with 365, general kind of IT issues, we'll look after that from an IT point of view. But we supply hardware and servers and all that kind of stuff. Telecoms wise, all kind of VoIP systems, a company called 3CX that we work with. We partner with those guys, and then electrical will do anything from a plug to pat testing up to EICR testing, as well as EV chargers. And that's as much as I'm going to kind of bore you with what we do today. So, like as I say, we've been collaborating with the IT trainer now probably for nearly 2 years, I think. Viv, is that right? Something like that. A couple of years. And last year when we intended to put on about, I think we were going to do 8 courses last year. We ended up with 33 webinars with over 350 people attending those. So it kind of mushroomed in lockdown. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Viv. So Viv will talk you through some of the apps on 365, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'll let Viv get on with it. So over to you, Viv.
Yep. Good morning. My name is not trainer. It is Viv, yeah, short for Vivian. So there we go. It's always a good icebreaker. What's your name? And people don't believe me. So this morning we've got about 2.5 hours in here. So obviously what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to cover Microsoft 365. It's a vast topic. If you're starting into this world of 365 and you've never really looked at it and you're just using the desktop applications, there's probably going to be a lot of information today for you to look at, for you to see, for you to be aware of. If you're already in that world, it's just changing and progressing and evolving at such a high pace that there's always something new on the radar. And the big thing about Microsoft 365, and when I come on in a second and share my screen and we'll start on the Office portal, is the fact that they're making Microsoft over the last number of years, and Andy and me and stuff, we train a lot of Microsoft stuff, but we are not employed by Microsoft. We're not anything that way with Microsoft. But what we found with Microsoft over the last number of years, they're very much focused on what the end user needs. I feel that Microsoft back in the day used to be, hey, how many bells and whistles can we put on a product? And most people are going, well, I don't need to use that, or what is it used for, or anything like that. But I feel that they're very much more reacting to the current environment and to what customers need. So we can't cover everything in detail today. We will try to ask any questions you have, but what we want to do is focus on some key areas. And these key areas include things like your OneDrive and your sharing. These key areas focus on things like what's happening and coming up in Teams. And then we're going to touch on the other apps. A little bit of housekeeping to begin with. When I share my screen, you'll see that I'm an hour ahead because I'm actually based in Germany. I'm not German, obviously. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, but I spent 13 years of my life recently in Sheffield, and I was traveling back and forward every other week. And a year ago, that was stopped, obviously. So and now I'm talking to everybody on these platforms. So I'm an hour ahead. Questions and answers. We're going to welcome these questions and answers. And even if we can't answer them now, we will actually go away, find out information and get that to you. We are recording this session, so you will be able to access it afterwards. But with questions and answers, because there's quite a few of us on this morning, can I suggest, and I'm going to share my screen now, can I suggest that you use the chat? Now, in the chat, Andy will curate that and he will answer where he can. Rich might jump in and answer where he can, and we're happy for those questions and things to go in there. I will come back after every sort of section and see if there's any questions that I can answer about that specific topic. So if it's, say, for example, OneDrive, we'll come back and we'll talk about any questions you have relating to that that haven't been able to be answered in the chat. And obviously, if it's a much more in-depth, complex sort of question and answer, then we might have to deal with it at the end or come back to it at the end, if that's okay for everyone. Now, for the chat, you just open the show conversation window. As I said, there is all the features now. If you haven't seen it, you've got the ability to raise hand. I think with raising hand with this many people, it would I wouldn't be able to get back to it as often. So please use conversation. Is that okay? Yep.
Yeah.
And Andy will deal with the people coming into the lobby as well, if that's okay. So where I want to start with is the Microsoft homepage, the portal. Now, if you don't know what this is, let's reverse a little bit. Microsoft 365 is what you used to have. All of your Outlook, your Outlook, your Word, your Excel, your PowerPoint, your project, your Exchange servers, but you also have the online part to it. And that's why it's the cloud, if you want to call it that. Now, I'm not going to go into that in detail. I think we've all got kind of used to this sort of concept of the cloud over the last 5 to 10 years, whether that's Netflix, Disney Plus, whether that's Prime Video, whether that's backing up your phone to the iCloud or the Google Drive or Dropbox or WeTransfer. All of those sort of platforms and the Microsoft cloud are very similar. It's called 365 because you're meant to be able to have access to it anywhere, from any device that's internet connected all the time. However, if you were on the other night, you might not have been able to sign in because they had a big outage. And I suppose things like that can happen. So there's a bit of IT humor goes on being calling it like Microsoft 355. But there we go. But if you don't know and you've never actually gone to it, if your company has moved you onto 365 and you're just using the desktop applications as normal, and I have no issue with the desktop applications. Most of my life I spend on the desktop where I can because the applications are fully fledged. They're much more, you've got all the features available on it and you're not having to work from a web browser. So I like working from there. But if you've never gone to office.com, so that's www.office.com, I'd suggest that you sign in with your email address and your password, or your sign-in details with your organization. And when you sign in, you get this lovely window. So it says good morning or good afternoon. It's got all of your apps down the side. It's got a search bar usually at the top, which I don't know where that's gone today. This little grid, and so here's a little bit of navigation around the 365. Then we'll mention some of these apps, and then I want to jump in to talk about sharing and OneDrive and things like that. If you press that button, which is called the grid or the menu button, that opens a menu where you get the option to look at all of the apps that you've got available for Microsoft. And if you want to, at any stage that you're in any Microsoft online application, if you press that, you get a menu. But on top of that, anytime you're anywhere in the Microsoft 365 environment, if you hit Office, it brings you back to this main page. Hey, my search bar's appeared. That searches everything through Microsoft. So that's whether it's your contacts on your Outlook, whether it's your emails, whether it's your SharePoint sites, your OneDrive, your documents, etc. Over at this side, you've got your profile. And here you've got your settings, which includes what it looks like in the background, your language and your time zone, whether you like dark mode, and if you need to be able to change your password. So all of that is available. As you come down here, you get local documents, more recently used things, etc., etc. You can change the layout of this page. I find that this is quite useful. Here you can create, so you can create Word documents, you can create Excel, you can create PowerPoint, and this is the apps. And as I said, we'll come back to this properly later to touch on some of these apps. Here's your Outlook. That's an exact replica of your Outlook on your desktop. So if you're somewhere else and you need access to your email, you can jump onto Outlook. The Outlook here looks like your Hotmail or your Outlook that you would normally have. Here's your Word. Up here we've got our Word, our Excel, and our PowerPoint. This is Word Online, Excel Online, PowerPoint Online. Now, again, as I said before, these are not as good as, for example, you would have on your desktop applications. Some of the licenses with Microsoft only give you the online versions, not many of the licenses. But if it's like if it's a member of staff who comes in once a week, or if it's somebody who doesn't work normally from a desk, you've got the ability on licensing to have them just as a web app. But these are useful for quick edits, and these are useful if you're out and about and things like that. But on top of that, Microsoft have really moved into the mobile world, not with their mobile devices, obviously, but with actually having their applications available on Android devices and on Apple devices. So you can get an Office app on your mobile, Outlook on your mobile, and pretty much every single application that we talk about today is available on Android and Apple on either tablet or mobile. So you've got access to this stuff wherever you are and whatever you need to do. So let's jump into OneDrive. Let me explain what that is. Again, we'll spend maybe 2 minutes explaining what it is, because just to make sure everybody kind of has an understanding of that. OneDrive is your storage. So you've got two spaces within your Microsoft environment to store. You've got OneDrive and you've got SharePoint. OneDrive is your personal storage space. So if you want to think back, this would have been your space on maybe your server that you could access and nobody else could access. Or if you want to take a comparison to your computer, it's like your My Docs, your My Pictures, your My Desktop. This is the space where you have got your information stored. SharePoint, however, is your shared documents. That's your company space where your company files may reside. Now, I'm aware that people in organizations will still have file servers, will still maybe use different online platforms and various things to store their documentation. But in principle, with Microsoft 365, that's a distinction. Your SharePoint is your shared drives where company records sit, where maybe documents and finance files and things that multiple people need access to. They would sit on SharePoint in the 365 environment, and OneDrive is where you store your stuff. So OneDrive is comparable to Dropbox or Google Drive, or even using WeTransfer. So for example, if you have in your organization people using Dropbox, you probably don't need to. You probably can get rid of that subscription and move across to OneDrive. Every single user on Microsoft 365 gets 1 terabyte of online storage. Now, when we talk about 1 terabyte, that's a crazy amount of space that you get. I don't even fill it, and I back up my whole laptop to the cloud. We're talking about probably between 400 and 500,000 high-resolution photographs, so 13 or 14 megapixel photographs from one of the latest cameras that you would have. Or if you want to think of one of the latest phones, a 256 megabyte or gigabyte phone from Apple, or say, for example, Samsung, it's the equivalent of the data on 4 of these phones, the amount of space. So you've got a lot of storage space going on here. Your organization may have configured this really well. So when you actually have moved to 365 and when you've used OneDrive, it may well be that this stuff is already synchronized and set up to back up your desktop. However, if you haven't, or if you're on a new machine and you need to get your data back again, what you can do is, one of the first things you can do is you can press the sync button. And the sync button, what it does is it makes a connection between your OneDrive on the cloud and your OneDrive on your desktop. And you go through a process of signing in. And then when you've done that, what happens is you get a nice little folder here, which says OneDrive and your organization name. Now, what that means is everything that is in the cloud is available here. Everything that I save into these folders is then updated, uploaded, and synchronized with the cloud, and vice versa. But it also means that I can actually get the OneDrive app on my phone. And one of the key things that I find that people, this synchronization of back and forward is a really good way of actually getting data, because people still will go out and about, take a photograph, take a video on a site or something like that, and then they'll come back and they'll plug it in, or they'll email it to themselves, and then they'll upload it. Well, if you actually use your OneDrive app on your phone, you can open a folder, you can open the document library, you can do anything. You can take a picture and straight into it. You can take a movie, you can scan a document, and Microsoft Office Lens will automatically put through the ability to synchronize that up to your computer. So all of that is entirely possible. That you've got that ability to have that synchronization back and forward between your phone or tablet straight to your desktop, because once it's uploaded to the cloud, it then comes and goes onto your computer. So that's that. You can work from your desktop then. You can save to here, you can upload from here, you can do whatever you need to do from here. Let's talk a little bit about this. Not crazy long period of time, because as I said, we don't have a crazy amount of time to go through today. But these things mean something. Because what actually happens is when you synchronize it with your computer, if it's a new computer, you'll actually have 2 different icons going on here. The cloud icon means this is not available on your computer. It's available when you're connected to the internet. It's like an online file. So it's a little bit like if you press a button on your Netflix, it's not actually delivering a video and it's not actually on your computer. It then gets downloaded and you start to watch it. So for example, if I take a file that's down here and I double click it, this is a cloud only file, and I double click it, it now downloads that. It should pop up a little window. There we go. We're downloading this and we're opening it. And the reason for this is quite regularly when you include things like your company shared information and your own personal information, probably that won't all fit on your computer. So Microsoft have a little system where it cleans up your computer and you can manually clean up your computer. So when it synchronizes for the first time, the first thing it does is it just takes down the headers or the table of contents or the information that you need for the that you need. So you don't get the content. So it downloads the content when required. Once it's been downloaded, you get a little tick. And the green tick means that it's now available on this computer. So you can actually manage these things from your right click. So if I, for example, if I wanted to take this video, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to waste the bandwidth when I'm sharing the screen. But if I right click on my desktop, I get the option here to always keep in this device. That downloads it. Now that's great. Now I know none of us are really traveling much anymore at the minute, but when we start to travel again and you're going on a train journey or on a plane or whatever, and you need these files in advance, or if you're in a poor internet connection and you want to download a batch of Excel spreadsheets in a folder before you need to work the next morning, you can do it by right clicking in the folder and always keep in this device. I could right click in this folder here and I could always keep on this device, and that downloads it. Now, I don't think there's much in that folder, so it shouldn't take long at all. And what it's actually going to do is going to give me a solid green tick. And that actually says always available on this device. So these icons mean something. If you're running out of space, Microsoft cleans it up. And also, you can uncheck that yourself using the right-click menu, or you can free up space. And then Microsoft leaves the titles on your computer, but actually takes the content and it's backed up to the cloud. So that's that. We'll come back in a second to talk about any questions on that, but I actually want to talk about sharing, because sharing is a key part of what you want to do. Some organizations this is closed down, but if I'll be honest, in most organizations it's still available, so you do want to know how to share properly. So if you come along to any document on this web page, by the way, this is the OneDrive on the web. This looks very much like Google Drive or Dropbox or anything else. If you're used to those sort of tools, you got your files, you've got your recent files, you click on shared and it shows shared by me and shared with me. And then you got your recycle bin. It holds stuff for a month, and then in a second stage recycle bin, it holds things for another 2 months. So if you delete something by accident, as long as you get it back within 3 months, you should be okay. Doesn't mean you don't want to back up in case. So if I check any of these, I get menu options at the top. Within the web world, and especially in the Microsoft world, anytime you see 3 dots, whether it's horizontal or vertical, it means more options. So if I click on that, I get more options. To move it, to copy it, version history, which we'll touch on later. I can rename, delete, download. Now, obviously, I would work from my desktop for most cases, but I just want to show you that you can do it all from the web as well. And I want to actually start my, you can open in the browser and open in the app for the file. But let me choose share here. And share is, you can do this from SharePoint and you can do it from OneDrive. And you can share a document or you can share a folder, a file or a folder. Now, why would you want to share instead of attaching emails? Well, there's a number of reasons that you want to do that. Firstly, emails inherently insecure unless you're actually sending encrypted emails. Yes, it might be secure in your Exchange server. Yes, it might be secure when it gets to the other end and they're a secure server, but it's not secure when it's being transmitted. Second reason is if you're sending large files, you end up resorting to something like WeTransfer, or you end up resorting to sending it on a memory stick, or you end up resorting to dropping it into Dropbox. Well, what you've got here is you've got the same tool. You can share a large file, or you can share a series of files without having to zip and try to attach it somewhere. You share the whole folder. And again, if you've got a document that you want to either just send it out to, say, your team, and that document gets updated every week, well, instead of you having to send an attachment every week, you share it out, and once you change it, they see all the updates. Or if you want to collaborate on a document, and normally there's a chain email going around, well, you can replace that chain email with a shared document that multiple people can either view or update. So that's the reasons for sharing. It's secure. It's more secure as well. You've got a number of options when you come to share. And I want to spend probably 5 minutes on this. Then we'll come back and ask any questions about sharing and stuff like that. And then we'll move on to a few other things about the desktop apps and how to interact. The default from Microsoft on your tenancy, so the whole 365 environment is called your tenancy. The default setting from Microsoft is a different option than this. The default setting says anyone with this link. So how I got to that screen, you can change your type of share that you create. And you do that by pressing on that. Now, I think this is quite important to know and quite important to understand, and maybe it needs to be passed on to team members, etc. Because the default can be changed, and I change it in any organization I work with, and we usually change it to things like specific people or people in your organization. But let's talk through the 4 options quickly. Firstly, at the top, the default originally from Microsoft, which as I said I changed, is anyone with this link. That's not very secure. I don't like it. I understand where it can be used. So say, for example, if you're sending out a newsletter and you want to send out something in it, you could put in anyone with this link. So whoever the newsletter goes to, they can click on that link and get access to that document, that article, that news page, that Word PDF that you created. For example, marketing materials. You want to have people be able to download something from the internet, a video that you want them to be able to watch. Again, anyone with this link is a great tool. Apart from that, you shouldn't use it because it literally is what it says in the tin. If somebody passes that link on, then they've got access to your private and confidential information. If you are using anyone with this link for the reasons that I mentioned, you might want to put an expiration date on it so you don't have to go back and remember about it. You can also have it that your system automatically sets a 1 month, 2 month expiration date, however long you want on anything shared that way. So that's quite useful instead of having to remember what have I shared out and has it expired, say an offer sheet. So you've sent out an offer sheet and it expires at the end of April. You want it to expire. You can set a password. That's not the same as having it secured because somebody passes the link on and passes the password on. Yeah. You can turn it into read only by just checking that button. And you can also block download. You can still take a screenshot, but it means it's web only. And there's a third option now that's only available on the web page, which is halfway house. The concern that what happened that Microsoft changed was as people were sharing more often, somebody would open a document, they'd click on their mouse somewhere or they'd click on their keyboard and it would update those changes. So now if it's open in review mode, somebody has to physically say, I want to edit this document. So it gives them an option. So as I said, times that this can be used. This is much more secure. People within your organization. Again, if it's somebody's private and confidential HR details, you don't want to be doing that because if somebody replies to an email with a link in it and copies other people in, if they're in your organization, they can see it. People with existing access. You may think, why is this here? Well, this is here exactly for the reason of you sending an email to people saying, I've just updated that folder, I've just updated the file, and you get 6 emails back saying, hey, I've lost the link. So you can actually give them an update saying, here's an update. And the one that I use primarily is specific people. Specific people allows me to select who it's going to. That can be a group. So if a group set up in your Outlook, that can be a distribution list, or that can be a series of individual people that you want to share this with. And again, you can make it read only. You can open it and get it opened in review mode, and you can block the download. So let's quickly apply this, and I'm going to send it to Andy. So we can do a couple of things. If it's inside your organization, it does that. But if you choose an email address outside your organization, Microsoft immediately lets you know. It's just a little hint and a tip. Now, you could send it from here with a message in. I think it looks a little bit spammy. So what I do, I usually do this. I take the link. It's copied already. I go across to my Outlook. I open a new email. And I come down here and I go, hey, Andy. And I paste the link in. These days, Microsoft changes that link to one of these. It looks much nicer. I can put a thing in here. This is for you. Can we collaborate in this document? What do you think? Etc. etc. And I can put my signature at the bottom. It's personalized and it doesn't look spammy, because if you send it from Microsoft, it says Microsoft on behalf of Trainer or Viv Brandy or whatever your name is would like to share this with you, and people are starting to try to spoof those. So I find this is nicer. It also, when you drop it in here, you can actually change the settings, and we'll come back to that in a second. So that's all fine and great, but I don't want to go to my web page every time I want to share a document. Well, you don't have to. So let's take this. I'll come down to some sort of document that I haven't shared for a long time, because I've got lots here. If I right click here, I can press the share button. And this uses a OneDrive for Business app on your computer. And it looks very, very similar to how you would do it in your desktop. Ever so slightly different down here, but you can press that and you can change your settings and you can send it from here. If you're working in Word, or if you're working in Excel or PowerPoint, you can do the same by pressing the share button. So you're in the middle of a document, you would like somebody to collaborate with you, you're finished, you've saved it, and we're going back to your email to do it, you can do it from the share button. And from here, you can choose your settings, and you can do the same again. Now here is an interesting button as part of it. If you decide that you actually want to send it as a PDF instead, or as an attachment on Word, you can do so. And if I press PDF here, what it would do, it would convert this document into a PDF. I wouldn't then have to go through the rigmarole of file save as or file export and then go to my email and find it. It would turn it into PDF, it would open my email, and it would attach it in the attached documents. So it's a really useful little tool. If I'm in, so you can do it from there. If I'm in Outlook itself, I can come down here, I can attach files, and you've noticed this has been around for a long time. But obviously, one of the things, if you attach files, these ones here, as we can see, they've got a little cloud with them. So let's click on this one. It asks me, do I want to share the link or attach a copy? So I'm going to do a share link. And up here, it tells me that the recipients can edit. Can I change it from here? Well, yes, I can. I click the arrow down, I change permissions, and I can change them through that menu. So from wherever I am, the web page, from the document itself, from my desktop, or from Outlook itself, I can share something and I can make the changes. The same happens in this here, specific people. I can make the changes by clicking on the link. And from there, it opens up the share window and I get the options. Why I wanted to open this slow is I want to show you one extra thing. If you do a share link like this, you get this really, really, really useful tool where you can actually choose to share it with recipients of this message. Now, don't change this setting until you've put email addresses in here. And once you put email addresses in, you put a link in, you change your mode, and you do recipients of this message, and Microsoft creates a share link to all of the people that are in the two. And that is a really useful tool as well. Here, when you're working on a share link like this, if the permissions don't allow them to see it, Microsoft checks those permissions before the email is sent, and it will turn it red and give you a little warning to say, we're not sure, or the person receiving this will not be able to access this document. So again, they're helping you out. Finally here, you can actually put a link straight in. So you do the same as we did before, but we put a link straight into the document there, and we've got the options. So that is OneDrive, that is sharing, and hopefully sharing securely. Before we jump into a little bit more about the desktop applications and how to work from there, does anybody have any questions that they want to raise on that area?
There's just one in the chat now, which I think Andy might be replying to that Sam's asked. So I don't know whether Andy's covered that already.
Yeah, I think, guys, that they've just confirm if you're okay with this, Sam, that they've just answered the question when he talked about the permissions in that last section that you just covered.
I think I'm a bit confused.
Okay.
But I think because she was saying if you send a document in an email, it's not very secure. So that's why I was sending it through the other way. But then you went and put the link in the email, and then I'm thinking, oh, okay. Well, does that?
So the link in the email means this: unless you have an open share link. So if I went in there and I changed it to anyone, anyone can open it. That wouldn't be overly secure because it's going by email. But these links are actual links, so they will only open to the person that this is addressed to, or only open to the person that it's shared with. So even though they're going over the email as an insecure sort of form of communication, you could actually print that out on a piece of paper and give it to someone. And if they try to access it, they can only access it if it's the person that you've shared it with.
Okay.
So yeah. So it's a bit, I suppose it's a little bit like you can have a key to somebody's door, but if they've also got a secondary key, or if they've got a keypad with a code and you don't know that, it doesn't matter that you've got the address. You still need the key to get into the house. What happens at the other end, though, as well, is quite a useful little thing to know, because historically, when you sent a link to someone from Microsoft, one of these sort of links that the recipients can edit, if they didn't have a Microsoft account, Microsoft forced them to sign up. Now, that was complicated. I understood how to do it, and you could talk people through it, but by default, it was awkward. So that's why people quite regularly use the open share link. You might have experienced the same with a Gmail link, that once you actually get a Google Doc through, you're asked to sign in with a Google account or associate a Google account or something like that. Microsoft have changed how they do it for the last year. That change is this. If you get one of these links and it's to you, and you don't have a Microsoft account, and what I mean by Microsoft account is you don't have a 365 account, you don't have an Outlook or a Hotmail, and you don't have, say, for example, an Xbox account. That's one of them. If you don't have any of those accounts, it opens up on a web page and it asks you to confirm your email address. You confirm that email address, and when it's confirmed, they will send an 8-digit code to your email. You copy that code and you put it straight into the web page. And then it opens it and keeps it available to be used for 30 days. And then you're probably going to have to re-authenticate. So it's authentication again. It's security set up through that way. So hopefully that answers your question, but hopefully that is clear as well about how it's much more secure. Okay, I want to come off the web page again, and I want to quickly show you some. I've got lots of windows open. Let's just press that button here to minimize them. Doesn't like it when I'm doing this. So what I want to do is I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about here in things like Word, Excel. Sorry, was there another question I was missing there, or?
No, you're okay.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay. So here, there's a couple of things new that we've got going on in here. Firstly, you might have noticed this, and by the way, this works in Word Online, Word, PowerPoint, Outlook, and on the mobile device as well. You can now dictate. So I don't know if it's going to run fast enough because I'm here, but the dictation actually works rather well. It even picks up my accent. So they are improving it all the time. It might actually put it on here in a second, and it might not, but oh, there we go. What language you wanted, auto punctuation, you've got what language you're using for spelling, and it mightn't pick it up because I'm already using my microphone. But you can now talk to your Word document and use things like new line and that. So let's leave that because, as I said, because I'm using the microphone, it's not liking me use it. Oh, it's eventually worked out. That works as well in Teams. It works in the online version. It works on your phone version. So you can actually dictate and talk to your documents. If you're working from Word or Excel or PowerPoint, you can actually do things like open. And when you go to open, you get the choice to open from your online. So your OneDrive or your SharePoint. You get the option to look from your PC, so browse places. Recent documents, which you can pin. Recent folders, which you can pin. But on top of that, there's now a button called Shared With Me. Now, when we do Shared With Me, this actually doesn't just mean stuff that's been share linked. This means stuff that even people have attached to emails. So if you get an email through with a Word document attached, Microsoft looks at that and thinks, hey, he might need that, she might need that next week. So what I'll do is I'll put it in this list of documents that have been shared. When you go to save, you can do the same. You can save to OneDrive, you can save to SharePoint, or you can save to your computer. This save is different. And the reason this save is now called Save a Copy is if an item is stored on OneDrive or SharePoint, there's a thing called version history automatically enabled. So it auto saves. So this is not like the historic autosave, which when you press the save button, autosave that's saved every 15 minutes or whatever. So if your computer crashed and you brought back your autosave, you might have your document, and sometimes it was corrupted, so you had all the little Egyptian hieroglyphics or boxes or whatever. This is actually a proper saving. Now, obviously, it'll depend on things like if you're connected to the internet and the speed of your connection, but as you make changes, it saves. So there is occasions where you need to think about how you work. The way we should always work with, say, we've got March's document. We've opened February's and we want to turn it into March's. You're meant to obviously start with File Save As. And we've all done the accidental save at the end. The problem now is as soon as you start to make changes, it's saving over February's. So you would open a document and you would go File, Save a Copy. If you make changes and then go to Save a Copy, Microsoft will tell you that, by the way, you've made changes to this. If you want to get them, if you want to get your changes previous, there you go. Autosave makes changes as you save them. If you made unwanted changes to the original file, you were going to store that file through version history. So there we go. You can turn that dialog off once you're used to it. I don't, because I use this for training. And I still forget occasionally, unfortunately, because I don't do best practice. The autosave buttons here, when you create a new document, you can press that on or off. And if you're working on a document with people, and we're going to talk about collaboration more when we come to Teams, but if you're working on a document with people, you will see the name up in the corner, or multiple people. And you can hover over them and you actually can see where they're working on that document. That's great. But if we hit this, if we're in the middle of it and you think, I want to make sure I'm working on the most recent version, the save icon here also has a little synchronization icon. And that means it saves the document and refreshes it with updates made by other authors. And it also updates those your changes to the other authors. So autosave is a great tool. And it just needs a little bit of management if it's a highly used document. Otherwise, I would suggest it's on all the time. You can turn it on or off, but if it's a shared document that most people are working on, if you turn it off and back on, Microsoft may struggle to merge all the changes at the same time. In that case, you would want to turn it read-only or something else first, make your changes, and then update it. But autosave is there. What happens if you want to get your versions? So say you've made a change, or say it's a shared document that you've shared out to someone and they've made changes that you want to revert, or if they've overwritten your formulas in an Excel file, or their grammar's terrible and you need to make changes to it, or whatever reason they've accidentally made changes to it. Well, let's have a look. If I'm on the web page, here's one of a document that was changed a minute ago. I can go into here and one of my options is version history. And over at the right hand side, a little pop-out appears and it shows me all the versions of that document. They're all being changed by me, but if this was a shared document, those changes would note who had made the changes, the person's name. So you can open each of those, you can restore it, or you can delete the version. What about from your desktop can you do it? Well, you might have noticed before, if you right click on it, you can actually go here and you can see the version history as well. It opens in a much smaller window, so I don't overly like this view, but I get that it's useful to have it available here. And my File Explorer's just stopped responding for a second. So while that's loading, let's come here. How do you get it from here? Well, if I click that button, you can change the name of the document from here, you can change where it's stored, and you can look at the version history. And when you bring up the version history, all of the details are here. Again, who it was modified by, and you can open these versions. When you open a previous version, that's my File Explorer eventually deciding to talk to me. There we go, version history. But if you're in the Word or Excel or PowerPoint and you do so, you get them over here. If it's a desktop version, you get them here. And the 3 dots means it's more options. So scroll down here, let's open version. And this is the whole idea of collaborative work. This is the whole idea of being able to check changes, being able to track changes. I've opened the previous version, which has lots of lovely information in it. And I can actually copy content, compare the two, or restore it. And if you restore it, it just makes a newest version. So if you were in version 16, restoring does not delete version 16, it just makes version 17. Compare, we'll put them side by side, and you can do the track changes, and you can go through it and decide what you want to revert, what you want to change, what you want to check, what you need to do. Microsoft stores up to 1,000 versions of a document for you. and it doesn't use any extra space. So that's how you get previous versions if something's been changed that you don't want, or if you just even want to track changes through it. So again, a really useful tool that's been added to the arsenal of being able to check through documents. I'm going to close that back down there. And the last thing I want to talk about in this and talk to you about is what happens if you no longer want to share a document with someone. So again, if I'm on the web page, I'm here, and I think to myself, I'm looking through my documents. Over in the right-hand side, I get these options, private and shared. So say, for example, this, I can click in it here, and I can see what sort of share link this is. I think this is an open share link, but it probably, oh, it wasn't. This was a specific share link to Rich. So I give Rich access to this Teams demo from last year. You can then, from here, stop sharing. Rich, I'm sorry, you no longer have access to this. Or you can copy that share link again if they forgot it, or you can add more people to it. So if I open this one up, again, more options, I can add more people to the link, and I could change it from an edit to a read only. You can have documents with multiple share links, and then you can change them at different stages. So for example, you could have that everybody, managers internally have got edit access, everybody else internally has got read access, and people externally can have access to it, but block download, an expiry date, and they're read only. I don't necessarily think you'll be doing that many with a document or a folder, but you've got that option, multiple share links for the same document, a read only version and an edit version. If you're on your desktop, it's not obvious where to get this. All of these with the little person beside them mean that they're shared. It's not obvious at all, but you have to go around the houses a bit. But if you right click and choose share, which kind of seems counter against common sense, but under your more options, you get your manage access. So to stop sharing, you have to open sharing and then go more options, manage access. You can see who it's shared with, and you can close. So I'm going to close that one. I'm going to say that link no longer works from my desktop, done. Which means you can do the same in Word. If you see two little people here, it means that it's shared. If it's a SharePoint document, they're automatically shared, or a Teams document, it's automatically shared. So just be aware of that. But if it's a OneDrive, that means it's shared. If I want to stop sharing, I do the same. I click the share button, and under this, it comes up, we get the more options, and you can manage access. So from wherever you are, you can immediately restrict sharing, change sharing options, control your documents, control your document flow. All of this is done through this little app at the bottom called OneDrive for Business. And if you click on that, it tells you what's been happening, files that have been changed, uploads, downloads. If it's doing something at the minute, it would have a little synchronize icon going on in a spinner. You can change your settings in here of what documents you see, whether it backs up your desktop. You can view online, you can open the folder. You can click on each of those documents from here, and under your help and settings, you can do lots more. If you have any synchronization errors, now that means that Microsoft couldn't merge the data, or something you uploaded wouldn't upload. For example, it's got too long a name, or it's got characters in the name that you're not allowed to use on the online platform of it. It'll actually have a little red X. If you've got a red X in it, please click it, go into it. It usually gives you instructions of how to fix it. Hey, we can't merge the changes, save yourself a copy, compare the two. Hey, we can't upload this file because your file name's too long, or your file name's got wrong characters, please rename it. And it actually gives you the ability to rename from within here. But all of that is available here. You can look at your settings if you want to spend time in that. It's quite in depth of what you can do. The last thing I want to then mention before we come back, and then maybe have a little break before we jump into the next bit, is you can share folders as well. So we've talked consistently here about sharing a file, because we've talked about Word and Excel and PowerPoint and sharing a link. You can actually share a file. So this allows you to share out a batch of documents, or a batch of technical drawings, or a batch of videos. Microsoft now allows you to share a single file of up to 250 gig. It also allows you to share basically folders out. The other thing you can do with folders is you can send a folder out that people can put stuff into. And when people upload to that folder, if they've got edit rights, you get notified on your desktop through the little app. A little pop-up comes and says 3 files have been updated and added to such and such a folder. Microsoft have recently brought out this extra additional tool, which is called, I'm going to change to this one, request files. Now, this is very similar to sharing out a folder, but let's talk about a few scenarios where you may use it. If you need to collect information from all of your team, like you need to get confirmations of their IDs. If you got an application out for a contractor and you want 3 contractors to provide that information through OneDrive, what you might have had to do in the past was set up 3 individual OneDrive folders and share those out individually and control them individually. Or if you've got your people applying for a job and you've got 20 people and you need to get some of their IDs through or things like that, you might want to set up 20 folders. So instead, what you do is you set up 1 folder and you press this button here, which is called Request Files. That creates a link, and we'll see it here. You give it a name. I've called this one HR files. Could be called plans and contracts or whatever. And then we hit next. It creates a link. I can send it from here, or I can copy the link and put it in an email. And what it means is if somebody's got that link, they can upload files. Microsoft scans them for viruses and things like that as they're being uploaded. But what it means is you can send that out and people can submit their files. But anyone cannot see anybody else's files. So if Andy and me were both uploading at the same time and they both arrived in the person's inbox at the same time, neither of us would even know that the other one had done it. So what happens, it opens a web page, it says HR files, Viv's requesting your HR files, description. They drag and drop those files into that folder in the internet, they press send, it closes the link down, and away they go. So it's a useful little tool. And that's kind of like OneDrive. I don't know if there's any more questions, but I think it's a really, really key thing to being able to collaborate, but also because people don't really know what it does and get a little bit concerned if they see this and that and the other. And a lot of us are ending up using other tools, whether it's OneDrive, whether it's Google Drive or Dropbox or WeTransfer. It can all come in-house, and that's protected by your GDPR and your data security around your Microsoft platform.
Just one semi-technical question from Olga at NHS Fourth Valley, Viv, if we may.
Yep.
She says, I have a personal Office 365 account and one from my organisation. Are they separate on my laptop, or do I need to change the account when I open Office 365?
No, it's a good question. You have 2 separate OneDrives. So your personal one will actually, if it's a personal, you can actually get OneDrive on a completely personal Microsoft account. So if you've got a Hotmail or an Outlook, you get a very small amount of space for OneDrive. You can also get OneDrive for business for your personal 365 or your company 365. If you look down here, I've got 2 little blue icons. That's my personal one, as in my business one, and then there's one for the IT trainer. So I've actually got 2 running here. What happens is when you decide to synchronize your personal account or your business account, whichever's first will sign in, then you synchronize your other one, Microsoft will create a new instance and they will give you a new icon down here. So if I log, this is my training login. If I went to my other login on this computer, I have 5 OneDrives running because I'm working with 4 organizations at the minute on my own one. And so all of those OneDrives will create a separate folder over here. So if we notice here, we've got OneDrive and then we got OneDrive. That's because they're completely separate. And as long as I don't put the thing in the wrong folder, never the twain shall meet. They can't see each other. They can't be synchronized with each other. They can't be seen. So just make sure it's saved to the right place and there's no issue whatsoever.
I think to add to that as well, Olga, I have three accounts for 365. So I've got a business outside of Affinity, which I've got an account for. I've got one for Affinity, and also got where I've been given a login by Andy and Viv. So literally, it's just a case of I think towards the top of your screen there's a section when you log in where you can change which one you're operating, which tenant you're operating in.
Jennifer.
Hiya, sorry I don't have the chat feature for some reason.
That's okay. I don't know why.
I've had a problem with OneDrive, so I've backed up all of my documents. But since doing that, some files I can't open anymore. It's like it's lost all the information. I don't know if you've got any advice with that or why that might be happening.
That might be more of a technical one. Don't know if one of the richest guys or whatever could advise on that. I haven't seen it. I've seen the odd file being potentially corrupted, but I've never had that. I've never encountered that at all. Sounds a bit annoying.
Jennifer, are you Mac or PC?
PC.
All right, okay. Just a thought.
No, yeah, it's something we can have. If you need one of the support guys to give you a quick call, Jennifer, it's certainly something we can look at for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Cool. Excellent. I think now might be Rich, if you're fine with it, a natural little 5-minute comfort break.
Absolutely.
I'll stay on here anyway, but if there's any questions or whatever, but let's come back in 5 minutes and then we'll want to talk about new features in Teams and how to collaborate in Teams. And then we might have another little break and we'll do what about the other apps.
All good. Great. Yep, cool.
Okay.
See you in a minute. We'll just keep this open.
Viv, I see that the together mode is now working, and you can actually select which. I have been messing around with it during that first half of the webinar. I'm sure Viv will mention that to the rest of you what together mode is, but it does look a little bit different.
I hope you're keeping social distancing in your together mode.
I don't think I did on that one. No, it was. No, there was a coffee shop, and the other one was the usual lecture theatre. So. Yeah, just some quirky little things on Teams these days, aren't there? So.
For those of you wondering what we're talking about, guys, this is where you don't have to have this gallery of people. You can sit people in using AI. You can sit them virtually in various locations like lecture theatres or coffee shops or something like that. So it's a relatively new feature inside Teams.
I'm sure Viv will flick it on.
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Yeah. I think we'll talk about it again later, but I think it's quite useful, and if you're in, I don't find it necessarily that useful if you're presenting or something like that, but if you've got lots and lots of people on the screen, so especially on a smaller screen, I'm using quite a small laptop screen here. It's really useful when you're in a presentation and loads of cameras are on, because what you end up doing is you looking around all the different the windows, the 49 that you can get now. And this actually just sticks them into a lecture theatre. It seems a little bit more. The funny thing is when you spot yourself in it, you're going, that's a bit odd.
There's only 2 Rich Davis there. We found that out.
I've took some screenshots already of it. So the 5 is with the camera on. So
is it? Is that number? What's the minimum number it needs to invoke together?
It doesn't. I think the large screen needs at least 10, but I think the together mode needs just a couple. It's just really weird if two of you are sitting in a lecture room, but but it expands it as it goes. So we'll see that as a minute. The more people that turn their cameras on, the bigger your lecture theatre gets. So yeah.
Do you want to get back on the way, Viv? So
yes.
are you going to do another break, and then we'll go through to 11:30, and then we'll be here till 12 for everybody. So you can the last half hour, 11:30 while 12, you can either drop off or milk Viv's knowledge for all it's worth. So in the meantime, I'll hand it back over to Viv.
Yeah, excellent. So let's minimize some of these things that we're working on, and let's talk about Teams. Teams, you may think you know, and I'm not being let's be perfectly honest here. We've had to live on things like Teams and Zoom and various things like that for the last year. But I think going forward, Teams will still be and other platforms will still be a key part of what we do and use. Teams, though, is more than just a video and meeting platform, and I think that's where the difference comes in. People have preferences. People like you hear people saying, "Oh, I love this and I love that," and that's not what we're really here to discuss comparatively in that way. What we're here to really talk about is how you can utilize Teams to collaborate and communicate, not just to do your video calls, not just to do that, because Teams was originally designed as a platform to source and surface your information with in your organization. Because let's be honest, you're sitting on Word, and then you move to Outlook, and then you go to a web page, and then you think, what web page? And then your company's got an intranet, so you have to check that. And do people actually sign in and check your intranet? You've got all this going on. Then you'll sign into other apps, whether they're Microsoft apps or whether they're other apps. And then you got the video and audio part of it and the meeting part of it. So the whole idea of Teams was collaboration and communication. And then COVID came along, and suddenly the video calls and meetings became really, really important. And Teams played catch up because Zoom already had 49. Now, obviously, Zoom had issues with security, but most people didn't mind about that. Some organizations did, and I know they've fixed a lot of their security issues, but Teams has played catch up, and in my opinion have caught up probably with most of the things. Some people like one interface more than the other, but what we're here to talk about is how you can use Teams to collaborate and communicate more than just a video call. So yes, we're going to spend maybe a couple of minutes talking about new features coming up in Teams, and we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about meetings in Teams. But let me just drop down and drop into Teams normal, and I'll jump across the chat first. You may notice the new features are even coming, and the new layout and the new look is constantly being changed. The whole popping out of your meeting being a separate window is now an entirely standard. It's no longer in preview. And I want to get rid of Rich, sorry. But we've got chat. Now, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about each of these key areas, but I want to spend most of the time talking about Teams and collaboration tools within Teams. And the reason I say that specifically is it's weird because the product's called Microsoft Teams and the big part of it is called Teams. So Andy may have got a lovely chat going on. As you probably are very aware, you can do normal one-to-one chat. You can put your emojis in, your GIFs, your memes. You can do a calendar appointment. You can attach files, which we'll talk about in a minute. One of the key annoyances, though, I have about Teams, and I get what's going on, is I treat it like an email a lot of the time. So I go hi, comma, enter, or morning, comma, like you would in an email. The problem when you do that in Teams, it automatically sends it. So you're waiting with somebody going, Viv is typing, Viv is typing. Viv. So what you can actually do is if you press that button there, which is the edit button, the compose box, it actually turns it into the ability to have a multi-line message without having to remember to hold your shift key down. So just a little one if you've got annoyed with that. At the same time, you can actually write a proper message in here. Links, paragraph, your bullet points, whatever you need to do. Now I do that, and now I send it. So that's the little thing. You can do an audio call, you can do a video call, and you can do a screen share from here. Just be obviously careful when you're screen sharing, who you're screen sharing with and who you give control to. Again, that was one of the issues with Zoom, that the settings were default to anyone could share and anyone could take control of that sharing. And you still hear news reports about that happening. And that's all to do with your settings for your meeting. But even if you do a share with someone, just be careful who you're sharing with. Make sure you know them the same as any sort of screen share. Nowadays, you can pop chats out. That was requested for a long time. It used to be really annoying. But if you don't know about it, you can just press your pop out button from there. It pops your chat out into a separate window. This is especially useful for two reasons. If you've got multi-windows going on, you can have a series of chats over here. You can have your main window over here. But also, it means that if you're in Teams or in a meeting or in somewhere else, you don't have to keep going out of that area to go back to a chat. You can have a couple of chats on the go at the same time, and you can have a channel working at the same time. And Microsoft are working to making everything poppable, outable, if that's not proper words, but you know what I mean. For example, apps within Teams are most of them can now pop out into its own separate window. So that's really useful. Over here, you can do the same. You can actually pop out from there. And again, these three dots are more options. So that's where you can pin someone to the top. What did I click to get the pop out was that? Let's see, messages here. If that is the question, I'll come up in a minute. The pop out is there. It's also above the person. When you do that, pop out chat, and you can also do it by pressing the three dots, and that will give you more options. And one of the options is to pop out. Yeah, there we go. That was the answer to the question. Mine runs, by the way, a little bit slower when I'm sharing, because A, I'm sharing from here, and B, obviously I'm sharing my screen while I'm trying to do activities on my screen. So it does have a little bit of lag. Another little thing though, and this is kind of quite key when it comes to things like working with people and teams in your organization. Your organization may have locked down the ability to create new teams, or you might want to create a new team for the sake of it. You can actually create group chats as well as a normal chat. And to create group chats, you do up here. So we've got a group chat going on with Trainer 2, very inventive names. And if I add that person if I click that and add them to the chat, you're not really adding them to this chat. You're creating a new chat group with these three people. So that will now open in a separate window. Any of the conversation I've been having with Andy is still kept with Andy. This is his conversation between the three of us. I can rename that group up here. I can do attachments to here. And this is where you don't need a full team going on. You don't need all of that happening. You just have a little group chat going on. Now, one of the key things I find that's really useful here, let's say I want to add a fourth person to this. I add people here again. So I can make group chats. I think it's up to 200 people. But this is where it really helps comparatively to something like, say, a WhatsApp group. Because here I add another person and I get to choose whether I include chat history, all chat history from the last 7 days, from the last day, from the last 3 weeks, whatever I want to do, or don't include it at all. So that's useful. And the reason that you want to think about maybe moving group chats away from things like email and away from things, email's fine, but just it's cumbersome, but away from, say, all their social network things like WhatsApp and stuff, is anything that's put into these chats and anything that's put into these teams automatically come under your tenancy. They're secured within your tenancy. The data is stored within the UK, or if you're an international organization, wherever your data is stored. So you're actually immediately meeting GDPR guidelines. But on top of that, you've actually got the ability as administrators within your organization to do, say, a data subject access request or an e-discovery, as it's called, to find out information if there's any sort of case that you need to go to or find out information about. All of that's now in one place. It's secured, it's controlled, and Microsoft don't do advertising on the basis of that. It's your data. So we might mention the admin centers and compliance towards the end of the session today as one of the additional features that you get with 365. So that's kind of the key things I want to talk to you about chat. The one thing I do want to highlight though is this. This paperclip icon makes you think that you're actually attaching a document when I'm actually in communication with Andy or if I'm in a group chat. I'm not attaching a document. It is not the same as attaching a document to email. I can choose to take it from my OneDrive if it already exists in OneDrive, or I can choose to upload it from my computer. Now, the interesting thing here is if I click on files, which is the same thing, that's where they reside. When you attach, that's where they go. This is actually more accurate of what's happening. Here it tells me that I'm actually sharing. So this is shared files between Andy and me. I've some that I've sent from me and some that Andy's sent. And we can actually go through all of these back and forward, and that's really useful because now I can look back through all of my files that I've shared and that he's shared with me. I don't have to go and search my email, but it's actually shared from your OneDrive. Microsoft, in the next month or two, they're giving you the option. They've just slowed it down, the release of it, because they needed to put some changes to it. What they're doing is they're giving you the ability that when you actually share through Teams, through a chat, you're going to have the ability to make it say, for example, read only, so non-editable. And this shows you that this is an actual share. It's not an attachment. And let me double confirm that by going back to here, into this here folder, and there we go, Microsoft Teams chat files. That's where you find them. So if you're wondering where they're sitting, that's where they are. If it's from your OneDrive, it moves it into there, a copy of it. If it's from your desktop, it uploads it and puts it in there. You're actually creating share links and you're collaborating on documents. So it's interesting to know that because that's the behind the scenes way it's working. And that's how Microsoft integrates and uses your OneDrive through Teams as well. So before we pop into Teams, let me talk about activity for a second. If you start to get overwhelmed with notifications from Microsoft, they've now got the ability to change your settings here. I think the settings are reasonably good now. Let's open that instead of this. But what it does, it allows you to change your notifications. And if you do this, it opens up your settings. So here you can decide whether you want to get activity. If you're not using Teams much, you can get activity emails as soon as possible, every day, whatever you need to do. Here, you can actually have 3 settings. Firstly, all activity. Please, I think if you've got that on, turn it off for your own sanity. You don't want to be told about every new message, every reaction, and all mentions. What you want to be messaged potentially is mostly this one: personal mentions and replies to your message. So if somebody sends you a message, somebody replies to a message, or if you get mentioned, that's when you get, and only personal ones. You can edit it more. It's very, very granular. You can go into chat, you can go into meetings, you can go into people, you can go into apps, you can go into everything, and you can do it itself. That is also found through here. If I click on my person up here, I can actually go to my settings. And from my settings, oh, obviously I forgot to talk about reactions. If you hover over a message, you can react to it. But I think most people are understanding of that now. Reactions, you can do a thumbs up or whatever. Settings are quite useful. There's where your notifications are, as before. Here's where you can change other settings in your language for spell check and things like this. Here's where your devices are. So this is where you can check what devices you're using, especially if you've got multi-cameras or multi-mics. You can set this up in advance, and you can do the lovely Microsoft Skype test call. They've automatically now got noise suppression built into it. So that came out recently, that noise suppression is by default, but if it's not working well enough, you can actually turn high, low, or off. And you've got your calls. Now calls allows you, you can actually set up Teams as your actual VoIP system, but most of us aren't. But calls allows you to set up an answer phone for Teams. So you can forward to your voicemail, or you can get them to ring you how long you want to ring for. You can set up a voicemail message. And what actually happens is when the voicemail's left, Microsoft emails you the message as well and sends you a transcript of it. And a new one that's come in, are you involved in transcripts and captions? So that's brand new, and we'll talk about captions and transcripts shortly. So that's your settings and your notifications. And another little great thing that you've got up here under your settings is you've got the ability to set a status message. And this status message is like out of office. So if somebody goes to send you a message and you put a status on, I'm not available today, it'll pop up at the top of their window. And while you're doing that, you can mention Andy. Deal with, or not everybody can mention Andy, I can mention Andy. But if I ain't mention Andy, the same way as you can mention anyone, can you deal with my inquiries? I was going to be less polite. Now, what you can do here is you can show when people message you, and you can decide when it gets cleared. So it's like automatic. So we'll put it on that it disappears in an hour. Now, what happens is I've referenced Andy in this, but it doesn't just put that on without Andy knowing. What happens is the two of us, I'll go back to the chat, the two of us get told that it's been mentioned, and it comes up at the top. Apologies for the slight delay and things changing for here. But Andy gets notified as well that I have mentioned them, and Andy can have the ability to turn that off and say, hey, don't be so rude, I'm not dealing with your inquiries. So it's there, it's useful, it's quite useful to put a little message in, and if you need to refer someone to someone else. Now let's leave that and we'll press Teams, and hopefully that will load reasonably quickly, but let me talk about what Teams are before it manages to load. Teams are the kind of key part of this collaboration and communication tool. And Teams are Microsoft groups. So Microsoft groups have existed for quite a while. They used to be called Office 365 groups. You can usually access them in your Outlook as well. And a Microsoft group is this. It's a group of people with a shared space, which is on SharePoint, with a shared calendar, with a shared notebook, and a shared email address. And that is what a team is. When you create a team in Microsoft Teams, you're actually creating a Microsoft group with all of those connected aspects to it. So that's why you've immediately got a group of people and things like that. So you may have or you may not have the ability to create teams in your organization. The difference between Teams and a chat is both that when you create a team, it creates a Microsoft group. So that's one thing to think about when you're creating teams. Do you need to create a new team, or can you do with an existing team and add a channel, or can you just do with a group chat because you're building a bit of infrastructure? That's not to say you don't, because I think you can have 300,000 teams in your organization, but that becomes sprawl as it goes. But secondly, the key difference between teams and normal chats is this whole idea of shared space. So you've got the ability to have shared documents. You've got the ability to have a shared calendar, a shared email address. And this is where you collaborate together in a much better form. Group chats don't allow you to add many apps to them. Teams allows you to add apps galore to it. So that's what you want to actually focus on. I see Teams primarily, not only, but primarily for things like departments and projects. So if you've got departments, they can do teams. Sometimes you can be cross departments as well, but then you actually have projects, and those projects would have a team. So somewhere where you want consistent and persistent chat, somewhere where you want ability to share and collaborate files, apps, documents, folders, sites, anything else. And we'll come across a lot of those as we do. If you go to create a team, Microsoft now give you a few different options. You can have, if you've got the ability to do so within your organization, you can actually create a team from scratch or from a current group. So if there's another group set up, because there's other parts of Microsoft that automatically set up these groups, like Planner, or you can take one from templates. They've created templates now. But if I do one from scratch, I now get the option of public, private, and there's a third option coming organization-wide. So that means everybody in the organization, but you only have a few that's organization-wide. These basically mean anyone in your organization can join. Private means you invite people to it. I see there's a few questions there. Andy, have we dealt with them, or do we need to answer anything at this point before we move on?
I'm answering Viv as we go. Sorry.
That's okay, not a problem. Just checking, because if there's something.
Thank you.
So we got these teams here. I'm not going to go to town on management of teams. That's something that you can actually spend a bit of time on. If you want to, if you own a team, if you set up a team and got that ability, or if you're set as an owner to a team, you can manage teams. Manage teams allows you to create channels, allows you to decide what members can do. So let's just quickly look at it. Add channels, add people. Look at your settings around what members can do. Can they delete channels, add channels, this sort of thing? So here we go. We've got, I'm an owner here, and we've got members and guests. Most teams will have many more people in this, but this is what an owner can do. You can promote other people to owners. If it's a really large team, you want to do a couple of people. There's where you've actually got all your channel list and how you manage that. That's where your settings is in the third tab, and what apps. Now, channels are topics of conversation. Again, that's how I would describe them. If you got a department or a project, then you might want to section off different topics of conversation. It's easy to consider when you're talking about a project, because you could have the planning stage, the design stage, the marketing, the deployment. but it allows you to spend time on a topic and stay in that channel. And that's what channels are for. And again, you can have multiple channels per team. Here's the other things in settings as an owner when it's come up, what members can do, what guests can do. Now, Teams by default is open to allow external guests to come in. And it tells you at the top that there's people, external guests in a team. Your organization may restrict that, but by default, Microsoft allows people to be invited into Teams who are external users. The whole idea of collaboration is that. Then you've got to think about the same way as if you email a document, who can see it? Who am I emailing it to? When you're putting stuff into Teams, who's a part of this team? So organizations have got ways of dealing that, whether that's sensitivity labels, whether that's putting guests in the brackets in the team name so that people are aware of it, and all these sort of things. You can do all that. This shows you who can mention it, team code, fun stuff. So are we allowed emojis, GIFs, and tags? So that is managing Teams. To get these ones here pinned at the top, you just click on the more options and you choose to pin. So that allows you to put your most important ones at the top. But let's have a look at one of these channels on the more options, because you can do a few things. You can decide whether you want notifications. That's how you get bespoke notifications. You customize them here. You can decide to pin it. You can manage this particular channel, but you can also get the email address to a channel. So this allows you to actually get an email address and put emails straight through the channel. Now, I know from Teams you can right-click and share with Outlook, and I know coming in the next 2 or 3 months, there's going to be a right-click option on Outlook to share to Teams. The same way as if you try to save something in Word and you get to choose to save it to SharePoint or OneDrive, you're going to have the ability to share an email straight through to Teams. At the minute, it's done like this. And at the minute, you probably don't want to be giving out that email address because it really doesn't look like anything. However, what I've used it for is automatic redirection of emails. So putting rules in Outlook that when an email comes in and goes to that folder, it automatically gets sent through to Teams, or you could forward it to Teams. So that is an option. Every single channel has got its own Teams own email address. So it's quite a useful little one. So there we go. We've got all this. Let's talk about here about the conversation bits here, and then we'll go into how to collaborate more. Big key difference and a big advantage in using Teams rather than chats is you can actually reply in line to conversations. So here we go, conversation related to a document. We'll talk about how that worked later on. I'm going to do a reply. If Andy might do a reply to some of these as well. So I'm going to say, let's look at this later. Now, that allows you to do full-on conversations. Simple enough. Not going to go to town in that, but you can have conversations with 20, 30, 40, 50 replies in it, and it actually keeps that conversation in one place. You can hover over it, and you can do your reactions to it as well. You can do the same when it comes to the compose box. You can open that up, and you can format your reply. So you can actually do a much longer reply with bullet points, and this is what I think, and you can mention people. Andy, can you come and look at this document? All of that is possible from here. You can start a new conversation. If the conversation is about something that's in this list, please reply. If not, you can start a new conversation. To start a new conversation, you have to hit the big blue new conversation button. The reason for that was it was too alike when it didn't have this big blue button, so people were starting new conversations instead of replying. A key thing though here is when you have this new conversation and you hit your compose box, what this allows you to do is add a subject like you would do an email, or even more than that, you can actually change it and put in an announcement. And if you put in an announcement, it's like a header, it's like a banner, you can color it, you can put a picture in there, and you can put your subheading in. You can also decide who can reply. Can only the moderators, so the owners reply, or just everyone? So this is good for announcements. And you can post this across multiple channels as well that you own. So you can put the announcement lots and lots of places. So that's quite a useful little tool. Again, let's not, I don't want to spend too much time pressing these buttons because it takes a little bit longer on my device.
Viv, can I just dive in with a question, if that's all
yes.
right? Yeah. Again, from Olga, how do you make sure you are in the app rather than in the browser when you're using Teams?
If it's an invite to a meeting, that will go to your browser and then come straight back down to Teams. But other than that, you just have, there's a setting on Teams to make sure that it opens in the background when you log your device in.
Okay.
And it signs in automatically. And that's, if those aren't checked in settings, that won't happen automatically.
Thank you.
Just here, you might notice here that we've got tags. I've mentioned Andy. I've mentioned general. This was ages ago, but Andy still got them. I've mentioned, so that was mentioning an individual channel. You can mention a team if it's allowed, and owners definitely can. And finally, you can actually add tags. Now, tags are useful if you've got a team with lots of people in it, because like management, HR, health and safety, marketing, whatever, you got a team of 30, 40 people and you want to refer to those people. You don't then need to think of all of their names and tag them individually. You can tag the whole group. When you're in Teams as well, you can meet from here. So you can meet from the team. Now, if you press meet from the team, and that can happen here or down in the new conversation, but what it does is starts a meeting in that channel, and everybody that's in that channel is aware of it and can join. So anybody in the team can do so. Or you can schedule a meeting for later. And if you do it again in a channel from here or from the calendar, what it allows you to do is everybody gets a provisional invite. So again, useful little tool, so you don't have to think of everyone who is invited. One last thing about channels before we talk about apps and connecting and files and this sort of thing is you can have private channels. Every team can have up to 30 private channels. A private channel is secure. If you are not part of the channel, if you haven't been invited into it, it doesn't even exist and shown on your team area. So this allows you to set up, say, a project again, and you have your marketing and your planning and your everything else, but you also have one that's, say, finance, and you also may have one that's called management. So, and in there, you can discuss finance or you can discuss management. Just something to note and just something to be aware of is you can't say you can invite external people into private channels, but you can't get them to bypass the team. So you can't have all of the other channels available and then bring somebody straight into a private channel. They have to have access to the team and then be part of the private channel. So if you've got something where you need that to happen, you need to do a little thinking. Do I need a different team? Or do I get everybody into private channels? But then that gets a little bit complicated. So you've got to make some decisions around how you want to lay out your teams and lay out your channels and lay out your private channels. When you create a new channel, you get three things at the top. You get posts, you get files, and you get wiki. Quite regularly, I use wiki because the wiki, it's not used an awful lot. However, there are channels and tabs that I use, which, for example, useful links. A wiki is great for a useful links list. A wiki is good for a how-to. A wiki is good for a frequently asked questions. So you would use it with that and you could rename it. Please read this first, or useful links. So the wiki is quite useful at the top, but quite regularly I would move those. You cannot remove posts and you cannot remove files. However, if you don't want people using posts, for example, in your general one, or posts in one because it's mostly about files, as an owner of a team, you can decide on that channel that only the owners can post into a channel. That's quite useful for the general because you cannot get rid of the general one. A team comes with it automatically. You can't rename it. You can't do anything with it. So you may actually want to turn the posts off and say, welcome to the team. Please look at the channel list. That's where you find your information. And don't let anybody react to that. I've got chat. We're using it here. So let's go across to files. Files here is very much the same idea. If you do a new conversation or a reply, you've got the attachment button. But again, let's be clear. It is not attachments that you're playing with here. It's not attaching. You're actually uploading them to SharePoint. And SharePoint we haven't really looked at yet, but SharePoint is your shared space on Microsoft. So if I went back to here and I opened up SharePoint, I would see all my SharePoint sites and they're directed and you can go to whichever ones you're part of. So that's one way of getting to SharePoint. If I'm in Teams and I'm in here, I can actually go over to the right-hand side, and when this eventually loads, there's an option to open in the SharePoint side. Now, if you're aware of SharePoint at all, you'll understand that this bar at the top is the SharePoint bar. So this would be the same as what you would see on the SharePoint on the website. So let's see how that, it's not really deciding to catch up with me yet, but while that's loading, let's talk about down here. This means that all files that are put in here are shared to everyone who's in this team. They've got access to it all. And they can also sync this with the computer. So that means that you could put files in here and you can synchronize this library and this library and this library and this library with your computer. So if you synchronize it, let me just quickly show you, it comes into a folder here. This little building, which looks a bit like dominoes, depending on how far away you're looking at it, says your company name. So that's your personal space with your company. And this is your company space, your shared space, your SharePoint space. If you synchronized every individual folder, it would come here as a list. I've synchronized the whole site. So all of those folders, as we saw, general, you might have seen there, we've got forms and teams, we've got different demos, we've got this, that, and the other. All of them come down to my computer. The titles of that documentation. That means that I can work on those files from my desktop. That means that I don't have to go into Teams and click download. That means that I can save to these files from my Word documents, or I can drag and drop files straight into here, and in the background they upload and they appear for everybody in Teams. The infrastructure in the background is SharePoint. So if I went to here and I clicked on Demo Team, which we are working with in Teams, I will see the exact same. So I think now that's loaded. If I did there we go. I could open the same thing in SharePoint. I'm not going to keep opening loads of things at the same time because obviously that will not keep it going very fast. But here we've got my demo team. And this is what a SharePoint site looks like out of the box. The bits down here with stream videos are bits that I've added, but this is how it looks like out of the box. You can make it an intranet page, you can do that. But if I click on documents, you will see that in the documents, there's a folder for every single channel that exists in my team, in my demo team. And it would tell me if I haven't already connected that it can connect to or is connected to a Microsoft team. I think it tells me at the top of this window when I do so. So here I could work and actually access documents that are in Teams. And it's from here that I press the button to synchronize this to my desktop. I can do that from here. And every one of those I open, it will say, this is connected to a channel in Teams. You can access the files from there as well. But you can come here and you can synchronize this. And if you synchronize this, you can work from all those files on your desktop. And I find that a really useful tool. You can pin documents to the top, and that's done as simple as clicking the 3 dots. And from those 3 dots, you get an option to pin. And you can decide where the pin goes. Do you want it here, here, here? So there we go, pin to top. So you can put your most important documents at the top of this folder. Copy link you can open in you can open in Teams, you can open in the web page, you can open in your desktop app. Now let me talk about that briefly. If you're on Teams and you want to have a quick edit of a document and it's not synchronized with your desktop, I would suggest that you don't choose to open it in the web browser, because the web browser version is exactly the same as the Teams version. It's using Word Online in this case, so it's probably better to just use the Teams version and you can edit it here. If you open it in your app, it'll go and open in your app and save back to here as well. The same sort of features, by the way, exist here that you would exist in your OneDrive app. You've got download, you've got copy link, you've got open. You don't have share from here. You can share from other places. You don't have share because it's already in a shared space with these people. You can move, you can copy. To get your version history low, you either have to open it in your, look at it in your desktop, open it in say Word, or open it on the SharePoint site. So if I went to SharePoint, I've actually got an option under General. I would have an option for version history under the more options there. So here's that, go to the channel conversation. This folder is connected to a channel in Teams. A lot of these things are new. They're updating this to make it more obvious to people what's going on. So when we're here, let me show you one other feature that you've got here. And this is useful for policies, procedures. This is useful for large Excel files, for example. One of the options that is built into SharePoint and therefore available in Teams is this option called Checkout. If I check a document out, everybody else gets to see a read-only version while I'm working on it. And when I'm finished with it, I can check it in, and then everybody gets to see the new version. So that's useful if you're changing, as I said, a really large Excel file or changing policies and procedures. When you're working on it on your desktop, every time you hit the save button, it'll say this document's checked out. Would you like to check it back in? Couple of things on that. If somebody checks a document out and they go on holiday or off sick, what happens? Or they forget they've got it checked out? Well, it checks back in after 14 days, and the owner, manager of the site, can always check it back in or discard the checkout. So that's possible. And when that's done, there's a little icon here to show that the document is checked out. So everybody else can still access it, but they get the read-only version of the version before you started working on it. Another nice little thing about this, though, is when you check it back in, and I'm not saying you use this tool all the time, but I find this really useful. When I check it back in, I can comments relating to the changes. And this doesn't exist in any other part of version history. But I could refer this to a date, a change in policy, a specific reason why this document has changed, and that becomes kind of like a statutory part to it. The only way you get rid of those comments is if you delete that version. So it's really good to say, we changed it on that date, and that's the changes we made, because that is timestamped to this very second that I checked it back into the Microsoft array. So it starts you on a journey, if you want, of kind of like creating a little bit of a document repository, a document history, a bit of security and compliance around your documents as well. From SharePoint, you get the same thing. So if I went back to, I think that was one document for pending, I just worked on it. Now, if I went to that in the version history and I could look at it, I can actually see those version notes. So that is a really useful thing as well. So there we go, version history available there. And I think it was that one. So if it was that one, it should show me the version notes that I've just added, and I've checked the document back into the document library. So that's all available in Teams. It's because the Teams sharing and the Teams synchronizing and the Teams files are actually backed up and stored. There we go. I've used that one before. Backed up and stored on SharePoint. So you start to have some sort of compliance and management and visibility over your document changes. Back briefly into here, one of the other things you can do is you can make a document a tab. So I'm not going to do it because it takes a second to do, because I've already got one up here called Excel. If I click on that, that's one of the files that is in here. So when you click on this, you actually get the access to the Excel file in the Teams window. So if you've got something that people need to fill in every week, if you've got a document that changes that they should look at, you can do so from here. You can make it a tab at the top. And if you make it a tab at the top, they get to access it in Excel Online version. And as I said, that isn't as good as a proper version of the document on your desktop, but if you need to do quick edits or people need to edit on the go or whatever else, this is quite useful. Takes a few seconds, loads this, takes a few seconds longer in mine, obviously because I'm sharing. This is autosave as well. Now, what I want to show you a couple of things about this. You now can make these full window screen, which makes it much easier to work with rather than having the bars down the side. So that's a much nicer environment to do so. You can actually start a conversation about the document. Now, this is the tabbed conversation. What that means is any comments here actually appear in the posts. So this is where I can start to collaborate here. So I can say, Andy, like a normal chat on the environment, and the I think the formula in here is wrong. Now he gets mentioned, but it actually goes in the chat, in the posts, and I think that's really useful. So now you could actually say, I've just uploaded this, guys. Can we all come and look at it? And can we give me your opinion? Is this good enough? Is this graphic good enough? Because it doesn't have to be a file that you edit here. It could be something like a graphic. It could be something like a poster. It could be something like that. And Andy can reply, and you can reply in here while you're on that. On top of that, we have this option here, which is, there's two new options that are available here. One of them is this comments. Now, if you do track changes, you know that comments have been around for a little while, but actually comments is actually a much better way of tracking changes. Because comments allows me to put comments on specific cells or specific parts of the document. And you can actually mention people, and you can allocate tasks to people. So while that's deciding to be really slow, just to let you know as well that another feature that they've just added recently to this is the ability to, if there's changes to the document, there's a little grid, there'll be a little different icon here which actually says have a look at all the changes that have happened to your document since you've last been with it. And that's going to be appearing at the side as well. So it's not showing in this because there has been no changes to this document, but you can actually get that as well. With the comments, which now, because I've done that, I have to actually pop this out again to get it bigger. But with the comments here, it actually loads in the side, and from there, I can actually say this cell, this cell, this cell. It's very, very, very much like track changes. You can also work with people. So because it's shared in here and because it's backed up by SharePoint, it means that somebody could be working on their desktop, somebody could be working on Teams, somebody could be working on the web version, somebody could be working on a mobile tablet version of it, and you could all be working on the same document. The only issue is if you all try to change the same cell at the same time. And what happens is it auto-saves each change as a different version. So say, for example, Andy's on it and I'm on it. He changes it first and saves, and then I change it after and he saves. There we go. This is a comment from before. He's never even dealt with it. It's terrible. But you can actually go to a cell. You can put a new comment in. You can track those changes, and you can put mentions in. You can replies, and you can assign it to someone. And then they can come in and they can resolve it. They can reply, and all of that becomes part of the history and the conversation of this document. So it becomes a really useful way of saying, I've made this change. Please check. So Andy always gets lots of notifications from me. I'm sure he gets, sometimes I think that the actual notifications they send me, he misses them. I can assign that to Andy as well. And we'll talk about assignments in a minute and where they end up, and he can reply and we can go through a conversation about a document, or we can both come into the document and work on it together. If somebody's working on it, you can see where they're working on it as well. So you would see their icon and you would see their personal name. So that is working with Excel, for example. But not only is Excel a tab, I'm guessing Andy replied to a post, so I could go back here. But not only, this is the start of the collaboration features within Teams, because Teams want it to be your portal, your place that you go to access pretty much anything that you need to access. So if you've never done it before, after we come back to this post, there we go, missing brackets. That's what I mean. This is quite useful to know. That's what I mean about it being in your conversation. Any comments? No, sorry. Any tabbed conversation is here. Any comments stay on the document, but both of those will be also visible on your desktop. If you've never done it, if you press tab, add a tab, you get to see lots of options of what you can add to Teams. So I want to spend, let's say, 10 minutes on this, talking about this tabs and collaboration, and then refer to these applications that you can use from the web page as well. Most of the top ones are Microsoft ones or recent ones that you've used. So if you haven't used any before, they'll be signed to Microsoft ones. But let me show you, there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of more connections. Microsoft, there's things like, I think, SurveyMonkey's in there, if I'm not mistaken, Zoom CRM systems in there. So basically, a lot of these organizations are making it available that you can actually, Zoho CRM, you can actually connect through to Teams. Teams doesn't mind that you're bringing that information in and you can work on it. So we can see here, we can add Word, we can add Excel, we can add document library, SharePoint, we can add forms, OneNote, your note sharing stream. And let me go through some of these and show you what you can do with them. Because you don't just have to use that. You can, for example, add a website or a PDF. So you can put a PDF file in that people can view in the thing. You can add a website. So let's quickly show you a couple of these. We've already got them set up, which is easier than setting them up. If I go to this should be our website. So if you need people to go to our website, if you need people to go and follow through a process, if that's a link that you want to see them, that is regularly updated with key information that they need to know for your organization, whether it's an internal or an external website, you can do so from here. And they can browse it. This is an actual live website. So if I went here, I can click here and it opens that page. It says it's not viewing entirely correctly because it's not a full-on web browser, but it's enough. And you can click up here and you can go to the website and you can show the tabbed conversation and you can pop this open in a new tab. So go, I think I'm down at the bottom and there we go, Andy and Fiona. So we've got that one. You can add other SharePoint libraries. So for example, if you had a policies library where everything was read-only for everybody, you could link that policies library through to a Teams channel. So it means that you put your documents in one place, because one of the potential issues, it's generally an issue with documents, is where's the definitive version of that document? And do we have multiple versions of that document flying around emails, being shared through OneDrive, being stuck on different Teams channels, being stuck on different SharePoint sites? Who's got the most recent version? Are you using an old version? Well, what you can do with documents like that, either read-only or editable, you can create a document library somewhere and you link that to every team and you call it policies and procedures or forms that you might use. And again, you can see here, they can access that through there. That was done through that. A couple more. SharePoint is now becoming more integrated fully into Teams. So SharePoint have a thing called a provisioning site where you can actually take SharePoint templates and make them into very, very nice SharePoint sites, and it gives you all the building blocks. So for example, one of them, and I'll show you this website later, and we'll put it in a chat, or we'll make sure that it's available afterwards so you know where it is. One of these nice ones is, for example, Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways. So it gives people hints and tips on everything Microsoft. This is designed by Microsoft. This is created by Microsoft. All they've actually done is brought together all of their videos, all of their training videos, little snippets, 2-minute video here, 2-minute video there. So for example, there's ones on Teams, but let me do this. I'm going to pop this out to make it bigger and have it as a separate tab instead of me having to play with it in a smaller window, and it pops it out as a separate tab. So you could actually have this within Teams. Because the issue is, as we know, trying to get people to go to an intranet, as well as opening their email, as well as opening Teams, and as well as opening the CRM system, as well as opening whatever else application that they use, is difficult. If you can actually bring all that into Teams, talk about it in Teams, collaborate within Teams, it becomes your portal, your intranet. So this hasn't been fully set up, but here we go. Get started with Microsoft Teams, or click on Microsoft 365 Training. And this is an actual SharePoint site that's sitting in my organization, and I can access it through Teams. So I can go here and I can scroll down and I can see anything to do with all the videos at Microsoft on all of the applications. Again, apologies, it's taken a little while to load, but it just, when it does, it'll show you that you've got all of those sitting available to you. Other ones that you can link to Forms, you can link to Stream. Stream's your video platform with Microsoft. So you can put training videos on there and link them through to there. So this is all available from here. Forms, Microsoft Forms is like Google Forms, SurveyMonkey. You can put a form, you can either have it for internal use or you can have it for external use, and those people can fill those forms in, or they could fill it in Teams. So for example, we built ones at different stages for COVID capture details, or you might want somebody to be able to fill in an HR form, so to change their bank details or to change this. This form is in Teams. It knows who I am because I'm logged in. So nobody else sees the data. It goes back to the form owner. And it gives me people the option to have access to requests and information and forms. But on top of that, with forms, if you put an external form out for a survey or whatever else, I know Rich does one after our sessions, that information can be fed back into Teams so people can see the results coming up on a Teams channel. And again, with the sharing, it takes a little bit of time. Stream, as we said, was the video platform. So all of your videos are recorded through Teams onto Stream. We've got lists, which is SharePoint lists, but it's a halfway house between Excel and a database, which are really useful. There's Form, for example. And then you've got the other apps, and all of these are available in Teams. So let me look briefly, very quickly at, say, for example, lists. And then I want to look at the planner one. And these are ones that I'll talk to maybe a little bit about the end, about the different ones added. Lists always existed in Microsoft. They were called SharePoint lists. Microsoft have recently revamped them and made them more front and center for everyone. And the idea is that you can create a list. It's more secure and structured than Excel. It's, as I said, it's a halfway house towards a database. If you need to capture and collect something securely with some data validation or some conditional formatting, and people can access it from internal or external, it's quite useful. So you could take, say, for example, one of their templates that they've got, or create one from an Excel sheet, or create one from blank, and you can create a list. That list can either be populated by people, That list could be populated from Teams, that list could be populated from a phone, or it could be populated using the automation tool. So information goes in and gets added automatically. So you can take their templates and you can use them, you can adapt them, you can change them. For example, that is one of their templates, and it's like an issue list and things like that. So that is lists you just added at the top. Planner is a Kanban style planner. So again, collaboration. Now, interestingly with this, it's no longer called Planner. When you go to it in 365, it is. When you go to it in Teams, it's now called Tasks and by Planner and To Do, because it does two things at the same time. So Planner is like Monday.com. Planner is like some of those other ones. I can't remember what, Trello lists. And you can actually open a plan, you can set it up with a team, you can allocate jobs to someone, you can put attachments in there, you can put checklists in there. All of that exists and can be accessed through Teams. Anything that's over here is a group activity, and again, that can be popped out. Anything at this side, you can add your own ones, and these ones at this side, they are not group activities, those are personal activities. So yes, I can have a plan over here, or as it's called now, tasks, and that would be a group space. Over on this side, with my tasks by planner, if I click that, that does an interesting thing. It gives me access to my tasks from planner that people have allocated to me, or I've allocated myself. But it also gives me anything from my to-do list, and it also gives me anything that I have flagged as important on my emails. So what it's trying to do is bring all of your activities, whether they're from Outlook, whether they're from Teams, whether they're from Planner, whether they're from To Do, and they're trying to put that all in one place. Now, I don't think I'm going to spend too much more time in this collaboration. We may do more afterwards at 12:30 if people want to stay around and ask questions about any specific ones. Thankfully, this loaded quicker than the other one. These are to do, these are assigned to me. I can filter this, and this is my personal list. So this works with the other plan. Let me talk quickly about calendar and meetings, and then let's look at the other apps available to you. Meetings have come a long way with Microsoft in the last year. This synchronizes with your desktop. Outlook, it needs an Outlook Online 365 Exchange to synchronize. You can do a meet now. I'm not going to do so because it will stop this call. You can arrange a new meeting. There is a feature now, which hasn't quite come here, that when you choose to meet now you can just get the link, which is quite useful if you just need to have an ad hoc meeting. Send the link to someone, then log in, instead of having to log in and set it all up and get the link. When you get a meeting, you can choose to put it into a channel, and everybody in the channel gets invited. Your settings are quite important on your meeting. So I'm going to look at this, and I'm going to edit it first because I want to have a look at my settings. And this is how you control what happens in your meeting. Now, most settings on Microsoft, if we're being honest, most settings in Teams are quite secure by default. But if you want to have a public meeting and you're going to open it up for people to join without having to wait in the lobby, it may well be that you want to go in and change your meeting options. You can't change this until the meeting is organized. You can now change it when you're in the meeting. I would suggest if you're doing a public one that you want to change it in advance. They're bringing out the option that once you set one up in your calendar and Outlook, because you can arrange Teams meetings through Outlook calendar, that you'll be able to immediately, while you're setting it up, change the settings. So that's meant to be coming by the summer. And I find that's useful, that it'll say, do you want to adjust your settings? And you can say yes or no. We'll come back to those settings in a minute. Let's pop back into the meeting. I'll go back to that later and check. We've got everybody here. We obviously can manage the people from here. That brings me up a list. And now you can call people and invite them. You can use the 3 dots and you can mute people. You can remove people from the meeting. You can do all of that. They're giving us options here around things like Shirley invite quite easily. And we got, as I said, the 3 dots. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time because it takes a while for everything to load. But there we go. We could actually do it from here. Who's in the meeting? Can they be muted? Can they be removed? Let's see if this has done this. Here we go. Let's come back to this and then we'll go back to people. The default settings should be quite good in your organization. If you need to, you can change them. You can now choose everyone can bypass the lobby. That would be for a public one. Everyone in my organization, trusted organizations and guests, people in my organizations, and invited specific guests, or only me. So you can do that. If you do everyone, please, please, please turn off who can present. So you would turn that to specific people or me, and you would manage it. So who can share their screen, who can present, that's quite important. And whether you allow meeting chat and things like that is all here. So all of those settings can be adjusted. They can now be adjusted on the fly. But you can actually go through this and change people from here. Adjusting these on the fly requires you to, obviously camera, share a screen in this. Adjusting on the fly comes in under here now, under more actions. And you're starting to see lots more actions here anyway. So device settings is your device. Meeting options is just what we've seen on the web, but now we can do it from Teams. Meeting notes, shared notebook, meeting details. We can do large gallery because we're more than 10. Not many people have the camera on, but it would allow us to go up to 49. They are changing the ability to have it that as we do that with more and more people, it's actually going to focus specifically on the people who have got cameras on. So that will happen more frequently, that large gallery option up to 49. Together mode, which we'll put on, it'll take a while to load on here. Together mode is being able to do it that you don't have to. Hey, hi everyone. It automatically chooses, but what it does is you can actually choose your scene that you don't have to actually just be in that sort of format. You can change one of the scenes, and we could go and decide to put more people in a lecture theatre, and as more and more people turn the camera on, it's more for you and what happens there. So that's great. So it's a little bit more like presenting. I see people think it's a bit gimmicky, and it is a little bit, but I get the bit that if you're trying to look at all the screens, and especially if it's a bigger computer screen or whatever, it can be a little bit tedious and a little bit annoying, and it actually kind of brings people together a little bit more. You can now focus on the presentation, and you can look at full screen mode, which is rather useful. They're bringing out, they announced 2 weeks ago, they're bringing out the ability that when you share a PowerPoint, that you'll be in the foreground, you'll be faded, but the presentation will go over you. So it'll be like a news presenter in the corner. That'll happen automatically. Obviously, I've got background effects on. You can add an image or blur. Live captions actually works. It even picks up my accent as before. It might take a while for it to appear on. Live captions is per person. So if you need live captions on because you're in a noisy environment, you can turn it on for yourself. So I'll just let that come on in a second. Hopefully it starts. But now they've inbuilt into it as well the ability to transcribe. So if you turn transcription on, it will allocate everybody who's spoken, and it'll actually make minutes of your meeting. And those minutes appear in your meeting, beside your meeting recording when it's all finished. I've used that 2 or 3 times already in the last week. There we go. There's the captions as well. So I don't know how, it hasn't given me the ability to turn them off yet. One last thing, very recent. There we go. I had to go back to the menu. One last thing very recent came in before Christmas is breakout rooms. I know breakout rooms have been in existence for Zoom for quite some time, but here are breakout rooms. I'm not going to send this to breakout rooms, but it is, and currently only the organizer can do it. So that will be changing. They've got it on their list to do to allow you to allocate somebody else to do it, which is good if you've got somebody with a PA or whatever. But let's say we took 4 rooms here. We could choose to automatically assign people or manually assign people. I'm just going to do automatic. The rooms are created at the start, but we haven't opened them yet. So once I create the rooms, they're there and ready. And then I can decide when I open the rooms. I can send a message to the rooms to say we're closing them in 5 minutes. We can open them one by one. I can pop into the rooms as the organizer. I can start them all, and I can redo the rooms if I wanted to as well. So that is breakout rooms. It's still technically in preview because they're going to be keeping working on it. But once Microsoft puts something on here, even if they say preview, they're pretty happy with it. They just say preview in case there's any problems with it. A few changes coming up. I've mentioned a few already. But one of the two big changes that are coming up in Teams is at the minute you can have 350 people on a call. That's going up to 1,000. So that's a crazy amount of people. So that's proper webinar style. But they've also made it, and you always had this option of a live event in Teams rather than just it had a separate license, but you could set up a live event, and that was webinar style. But what they've done is they're turning it, because it took a lot more work and you had to use extra software potentially to do it properly. But what they're doing now is they're giving you the ability that if it goes over 1,000 people, it automatically turns into a web stream. So that might be interesting if you've got a big conference to, for example, host, because what happens, you get more than 1,000 delegates, the person that's 1,001st, they will automatically turn into a web stream, and that web stream they can't interact with, but it becomes active for them to watch, 30-second delay before they see it. And I think it's something like 20,000 or maybe even more people can watch the web stream. The other thing that I find really useful that's coming up is the ability to set up kind of like an Eventbrite service if you're doing a seminar. So you're going to be able to, when you set up a meeting, you're going to be able to provide a link, and those people will then sign into that link, and that gives you a delegate list, and that tells you how many people are scheduled in. But it also helps with the fact that Teams and Outlook Calendar don't allow you to do blind carbon copy. And I don't like that. So usually you end up getting a link and sharing the link separately. This system will not only give you the attendance list, but give you the ability to do that. 5 minutes left. So this is just telling you some of the things that you've got available within 365, because we don't have time to spend on them. If I come over to here, I'll go from the start. Microsoft Forms. You saw one form available within Teams, but Microsoft Forms is your Google form or your SurveyMonkey equivalent. Mightn't have all the same things, but when you, if you, just by the way, in some of these topics, we've done 30-minute seminars, a little bit more in depth on forms, stream, lists, and some of the other ones as well. Automate, we've got one coming up soon as well. So you go to the Affinity IT YouTube channel, and they're all available there as well as 30-minute seminars. But forms, you can create a new form, you can add it to a group, you can share them externally, you can make them colorful, you can put graphics in them. You've got things like normal questions, as in people, just the standard text questions. You've got questions where you can have drop-down menus, yes, no questions. You can create branching, so if they say yes, it goes down this route, if they say no, it goes down that route. And you've got things like Likert, which is putting things in order, or those answer all these questions, what did you think of, and you answer 1 to 6, and there's a grid line of them all. So while that's deciding to try to do that. Stream is where your video platform, where all of your stuff is recorded. You might have a slight difference in your organization because Microsoft's changing where your stream videos are stored. They're moving them to OneDrive and SharePoint. So if it's a Teams meeting in a channel, it will go to SharePoint. If it's a meeting like this one that I organize, it will end up in my OneDrive. That means that I can immediately share them, which is a useful tool to know that I can immediately share my videos on stream. But at the minute, our organization isn't. It's moving as we go, but Stream is your video platform. You can upload videos to there, you can record your screen, you can record your meetings, you can put your training materials in there, you can allocate visibility to people, etc. So back to here, there's your form. You've got all of those options to do. You can even do sections. So this is your ability to have forms, internal, external capture. Stream, as I said, is your video form. Lists you can get on, so there we go. You can create content. You can look at your content, you can discover, you can set up groups that you share it within, you can share videos through to Teams, etc., etc. It doesn't need to just be meeting recordings, it can be your own, there's one on stream, it can be your own training materials, for example. Lists. On back to something while this is loading. One of the things you may have noticed when we talked about Teams there, and one of the links you can actually link, you as well as linking stream videos in, which is a great way to do it, you can also link in YouTube videos. Just get the link where you want it, or the channel, or even search from within it, and you can put YouTube straight into Teams if you need to send people to somewhere. As we saw before, we had lists. Here's a list environment in the web page. So it's the same sort of idea. We could go to any of these and we could click on them and it would open up a list here. That lists app is available on your iPhone at the minute and it's coming to Android later this year. Conditional formatting is available. Data validation is available in your lists. Visibility is available, so you can have it that only certain people can see entries on the list and that sort of thing. The Hub Planner is your planner. And again, there's an app for this. There's an app for pretty much anything on this. Sway, very briefly, is, I don't know why they're taking so long to load, but I had them loaded already. I think they went to sleep. Sway is where you get your turn it like a PowerPoint presentation. So if you've actually been ever sending PowerPoint presentations out and you've got, you know, somebody has to then download the PowerPoint viewer or whatever, this allows you to convert a PowerPoint or a Word document into an online presentation, share it within your organization, share it without. Microsoft automatically converts a document, or you can create from scratch. You can embed videos, you can embed this, you can embed Microsoft Forms at the end of it. So you could do a presentation, and once the presentation is done at the end, you could have somebody say, I want to have more information, and they fill in a Microsoft form. So all of these things interact with each other. That's the planner. New list is here. So that was the list that we had. We can add columns, and from columns, we can put in stuff. You decide what type of column. So very much like data validated information. As I said, hubs there, we've done that. Automators workflows. You can create workflows. By the way, every single one of these apps can embed into Teams. So you can get them on the web, you can get them on your mobile phone, and you can get them in Teams. Automate is taking automation, so a workflow. So for example, if you need to do an approval process, if you want to have the responses for a form put on an Excel list or onto a SharePoint list or email to someone, if you have a document that's put in or a holiday form that somebody needs to approve, but it also connects to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of external organizations. And they've now released it that it can actually automate things that you would do on your desktop. They've just made that free. So if you've got a process where you have to do 16 steps, like a macro in Excel, or like an action plan or an automatic action plan in Outlook, you can actually do that through Automate, whether it's a web-based one or whether it's a desktop one. And so that is part of your licensing that you get with it. Other things that you get as well, there's Planner, so you can just create a project plan here. Other things you get as well, which you might know, is there's a thing called MileIQ. Now, most of you probably don't traveling much at the minute, but if you have to track your mileage, this does it for you. Turn it on and it links to your account and it's free. And then you can slide it to the left for work, slide it to the right for business, and allocate what it is. So once you're traveling again and you need to measure that, just log in onto your account, just sign off your normal account, and you've got in the palm of your hand logging. They're actually expanding what it does. So they're trying to come into some territories like Concur as well. And finally, two things, data center. So your compliance, so your data centers with Microsoft is if you're an administrator, you've got access to so much under an admin center. I'm not saying go and change everything, but it's interesting to see what's there. But one of the areas that is really key that a lot of people don't realize is that Microsoft 365 gives you a load of tools out of the gate for compliance and security. And that includes things like GDPR. So you can actually do a data subject access request using this system. It goes away for a couple of days, searches for everything to do with that person, and brings it back into an electronically readable format. You then get to see it. You can say that's not relevant. You picked up the wrong information there. We need to redact that bit of it because somebody else's name's in there. And then you can provide it to the person who requested it. So what it does, it secures all your data, but it actually makes your life easy. Instead of sending an email out to everybody and say, can everybody look for Joe Blogs and send me information and I have to collate it. So that's available. Classifies data, it does reports, it does compliance. And one of the other key things that I think it's useful for, it does data protection. So you can do retention labels. So if you've got documents that need to be retained for 7 years and then deleted, you can put those in place. It's got classification labels. It's got sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels can be used in such a way that documents can't be shared out of your organization. And even if they're put in Teams where a guest is, it automatically blocks that guest from looking at them. But there's also data protection labels. And there's some default ones that you can set up. For example, you can choose to have British national insurance numbers blocked. So if somebody tries to share that or email it outside your organization, it's blocked, or they get warned to say, please be careful about sending this. And it even looks on things like PDFs that are attached to emails. So you can actually set those up with caveats so that the HR team can do it and the finance team can do it, but nobody else can do it, or credit card details or things like that. So they're all available under the admin center. And two last things to share with you before I answer any questions. I'm sorry, we went a little bit over. I did tell you about the lookbook. Microsoft SharePoint Lookbook, you can go here and have preset templates to bring into your SharePoint environment. And that's useful if you want to create some sort of communication site or management site. There's ones for schools, there's ones for that Microsoft 365 learning. You can look at the designs here. And if you search for Lookbook, or it's lookbook.microsoft.com, you can look at all of the designs that they've got and you can provision them. You do have to be an admin, or at least a SharePoint admin, to be able to do it. But if you wanted one for HR, if you wanted one for product support, communication side, and what it does, charitable side, solutions, new employee onboarding, pre-onboarding, things like this, or schools. The idea is you take one of these and it gives you the building blocks already. So you don't have to think, what should it look like? What do I do? And then you adapt them for your needs. The last thing coming is connected to it is a thing called Viva, which they announced recently. Now, it's basically a new employee experience. And you can look at it here. Now, there's 4 parts to Viva, and the 2 parts that are most interesting for me, and what I find most interesting from the work I do, is number 1, it's going to give us the ability to put a home page within Teams. So you create one of those communication sites, fancy information, data coming to people, and that will be the landing home page from within Teams. So as somebody opens their Teams in the morning, it opens their intranet. And from there, they can jump into their Teams, but it also then you can put videos, you can put articles, and it's bespoke to the person. So if something is to do with them, it will appear in their feed. That's one part of it. And the other, and that's coming in the next month or so. And the other part of it, which is coming later this year, is one that's called Learning. So they're actually creating an app that will integrate into your Teams environment, which you will actually have access to the Microsoft Learning, but you can also put your own learning materials in there as well. And it's kind of like one of those apps which guides people through their learning stuff. There is 2 other bits, including surfacing information, but there's additional licensing needed with those. So the bits that I said, Microsoft Viva, you can see all about it on their website. But the 2 bits are the homepage, which I think is called Connections, and then Microsoft Viva Learning. As I said, there's an awful lot to it, and I think we've ran a bit over. Apologies for that. We can spend time answering questions and stuff, but I will pass it back to Rich to do the formal close, but we're very happy to stay on to answer questions. And if there's any, but if people need to go, then we would officially have it closed. So Rich.
Thank you ever so much, Viv. That really informative as always. Took a few bits from that as always. If anyone's got any questions now, if they want to unmute and ask them, then feel free to. More than happy for that. If anybody's got something.
There's just one outstanding one here, Rich, which I've not been able to answer on the chat. Yasmin said, sorry, this one's for you, Viv. Hi, Andy. I'm trying to delete documents from 365, Word, Excel, or PowerPoint. I can delete on OneDrive. Can you explain this, please? Many thanks. I imagine it's some sort of permissions thing.
If they're your documents, you should be able to delete them from OneDrive.
Yes.
It'll go to the recycle bin. If it's somebody else's documents that they've shared with you, all you would be doing would be removing them from your view. If there is an issue with the documents and stuff not being deleted, it would actually be a technical problem that you might need to refer to Microsoft. If you've got 365, you can actually put in a service request from the admin center.
So in a nutshell, it's a feature that's meant to be there, essentially. Yeah.
Well, you can, yeah. If somebody shared something with you, it'll hide it, but you won't actually delete it. But if it's yours, you should be able to delete it. Yes.
Thank you. That was it from the chat, Rich.
Okay, well, I'll do my finishing bit, and then if anybody does want to stay on and ask Viv some questions, like I say, we're due to on 8 till 12, so it's not a problem to us. But just want to say thank you to all for attending today. I hope you found it really useful. We've got loads of free sessions coming up over the next few months as well. Our next one is actually next Friday, which is covering forms and automation. And forms is really worth looking at. And I will follow up with an email of details of all the courses that we're running, as well as a feedback form that you'll find we've used forms to collate your data. So it'll be worth, just please do fill in the feedback form, and you'll actually see how forms works as well. And you'll see lots of different ways, even how you can create a holiday form, etc. Using forms. If you do have any questions about 365 as a product, we're more than happy to talk to you about those. You know, you can message myself. The email later will come from me, so you'll have my details. And actually, if you do want a bespoke session where we can come into your office when times allow us, or do it via webinar, we can literally run you a bespoke session which will tackle specific to your business, and we can do an intermediate, beginner, or a more advanced kind of whatever level you guys are at. And I think that's about it from me. So thanks again. And if you do want anything else, like I say, just drop us a line, and we'll be on after this if you want to stay around.